A, B, C. A, always. B, B, C, closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. And D, Diamond. Lou Diamond. The man's a natural salesman and a national treasure.
It's time to take an inside look at those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have a presentation coach and founder of Ideas on Stage UK. He has worked with thousands of clients that want to grow their business and increase their influence through great presenting. He's on a mission to change the way people think about presenting. We're going to get into a very fun conversation here today. Thrive Loud listeners coming to us from the UK, Andrea Pacini. Andrea, how are you today?
Very good. Thank you very much, Lou. Great to be here.
Okay. So I'm going to do a little rewind for our listeners here because I want you to kind of like not just jump straight into fifth gear. I want to kind of build it up and move up the highway here. Andrea, if you could share how this expertise and thing became your gig and what you're focused on.
Yeah. So I've grown up in a family, Lou, of business owners, very small business owners. And so because of that, I've always been super passionate about business and entrepreneurship. I always wanted to run my own thing, looking at my parents. And so in addition to that, I was at university, and one of our professors, John Cameron from the US, because he knew about my passion, he suggested that I read a book. And that book was Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, the ex-CEO of Zappos. Unfortunately, he passed away some time ago. And that book opened my eyes to a different way of thinking about business. The subtitle of that book was A Path to Profits, Passion, and Purpose. And so that's why I became super passionate about purpose-driven entrepreneurship. The business can and should be a force for good. So that's one part of the story. The second part was that there was another book that changed my life, which is Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds. And that book also, I fell in love with it, and I understood, you know this better than anybody else because you are a professional public speaker, Lou. And that book many years ago made me understand that when we think about presentations, it's not just about slides and PowerPoint. There's so much more when we think about effective presenting, speaking in public. And so that's why I started my journey to try and become the best presenter I could be. And of course, that journey never ends. And then eventually, to cut it short, I ended up helping other people, professionals, business owners, and do the same thing, improve their presentation skills. And going back to the first book, that's why I've connected the two passions. And that's why today I specialize in working with purpose-driven entrepreneurs who want to grow their business and increase their influence through great presenting.
I love it. Now I want to ask some fun questions that I know that our listeners want to really know. What is, in your eyes, a few or the most common mistakes that people make when it comes to making a presentation?
Yeah, I think there are many, but there are three key things that come to mind. The first thing is that whether we are aware of it or not, but we often communicate a confusing message. Often we think that because we are so close to our subject, we know so much about it, we think that what we are communicating and the way we are communicating it, we think that it's simple and clear and understandable for the audience. But often the experience from that perspective is the opposite. It's confusing. So that's the biggest obstacle. The second obstacle from a visual perspective is the typical death by PowerPoint. You've got lots. Now, we don't have to use slides when presenting, but when we do, we definitely don't want to have lots of text and bullet points. People can't read and listen at the same time. So that's another challenge. And the third one, from a delivery perspective, I often see, I don't know in your experience, Lou, but I often see this inability to connect, to make a strong connection with the audience, which is even harder, by the way, now online. It's still possible, of course, if we know what to do, but it is harder today to connect with the audience, to keep their attention, to gain it in the first place. So these are the three key things I notice.
So let's try and get a better perspective as to some differences. There's giving a large presentation to a very large audience, almost like a keynote address at a conference. And then there's maybe giving a presentation, a sales presentation, or a smaller meeting to a much more tangible or graspable sized group. Difference in the way that you approach each one of these types of presentations in putting together the content that you need to?
Yeah, so there are some differences. I would say the main differences from a delivery perspective. So of course, being on stage in front of 1,000 people or even 100 people is different from being in front of 5 people. But I would say that another difference, by the way, Lou, is, for example, the level of interaction that you can create. Now, no, I know that you do that really well because I've seen your videos on YouTube, but not everybody can create meaningful moments of interaction when they are in front of 1,000 people. So it is possible, but it's not something that everybody is able to do at the very beginning of that journey. Okay. And whereas if you are in front of 5 people, then you can and you should include lots of moments of interaction. But then from a content perspective, I think that if you follow the right process, which is not about going straight into PowerPoint, which is what most people do, but if we start with the audience and their needs, the context of the presentation, the context, of course, will be different. And then if we brainstorm effectively to identify key messages, if we are able to translate our ideas into a clear structure, you need to have a clear storyline when presenting. Then if you get that part solid, then that applies in both scenarios, very small presentations and presentations to large audiences.
So I'm going to ask a question because I have an interesting thought, and I love how you called it the PowerPoint March of Death, or the Death March of PowerPoint, which is so true. I actually think of the PowerPoint as a back pocket aspect of a smaller presentation. If you're in front of a large stage and maybe you have more images, or you're telling a story and it's a lot larger, there might be a flow that you're telling people. But when I look at it in a meeting, is that, to your point, is that interaction that happens before you actually get to the content. That's the asking. Those are the question asking sessions in a conversation. And you may never need to go to the PowerPoint. It almost becomes kind of like, hey, let me show you this one particular thing that you're interested in. To your point, there's a level of expertise in knowing how to manage that. And a lot of people use their presentation or their sales deck or their PowerPoint keynote, whatever format you use, as a little bit of a crutch. I would love to know, Andrea, how you help the people that you work with either break away from having that crutch, or what they can do to instill so that they know what that overall format of a presentation is so they can be most effective. I think our listeners would love to hear that from you.
Okay. The key thing is that at the beginning of the process of creating a great presentation, we need to forget about PowerPoint. Or, as you said, I use the word PowerPoint because often in business, that's what most people use, but it could be any other presentation tool. It doesn't make any difference. And I agree with you. I've seen fantastic presentations and bad presentations with some slides or with no slides at all. It's okay. Now, the way you do it is, first, you need to think about your message. You need to be very clear in terms of what it is that you want to achieve, what's your objective, what it is that you want to communicate. And then, as you said, instead of using the presentation tool as a crutch, which then becomes a barrier, it doesn't help you connect with the audience. Once you have a clear structure, you know the key messages you want to get across, then the question you should ask yourself is, okay, how can I amplify my content in the most effective way? And actually, even before that, does it make sense to illustrate my content using a presentation tool? Because again, I agree with you, Lou. Maybe the answer is no. Now, if the answer is yes, and only if the answer is yes, then the idea is to take only what we do with our clients. We go through the content that we've prepared together with them, and then we try to identify the key messages, the key words, the key points that for which it might make sense to illustrate, to amplify them. And the key thing is that we should never use slides or PowerPoint as something that replicates what we are saying, because people can't do both things at the same time. They can't read and listen at the same time. But we should use them as something that illustrates, that supports, that reinforces, that amplifies a message. And when we do that, then it works. And then, but just one more thought, when we work with our clients, Lou, we also need to know that what makes them comfortable from a speaking perspective, because I see two types of speakers. You have the learners, the memorizers, and the improvisers. And of course, it's a spectrum. And we need to know, where are we in this spectrum? And I would be curious to know where you are, for example. Look, but it does. The thing is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But for example, if you are a memorizer, then it might make more sense to use more slides. Whereas if you are an improviser, maybe not, because if you are an improviser and you have a lot of slides, then you can't really improvise because you need to follow the slides. So these are some of the things that we consider when we work with our clients.
It's funny. I was thinking about it as you asked me that question. I absolutely am more of an improviser, but the content of a presentation, and specifically I'm referring to when I'm dealing with clients in client meetings. After our interview today, right after our interview today, I'm presenting, for lack of a better word. It's really a work session with the client, but they've asked to have a structured visual presentation. And that's one of the big things, and I think you nailed this at home. I love to ask the clients what they preferred and what they're comfortable with. And when they are we like to see things, we have trouble grasping difficult concepts. They'll never say that, but they'll basically say, can you at least help me visualize this more clearly? And a lot of times they want to take that away with them. And I love your theory is that interaction between the two, between being an improviser or a memorizer, the memorizer enables you to use that presentation so that you're in that good structured time. I do think there are components to every presentation, even the big ones on stage, that you have to have something nailed down solid, a key point, an opening or a closing, or some way that you want to bring things home, which is where I wanted to go to next, Andrea. To me, one of the messages that I try to communicate to a lot of the salespeople I work with is that a sales presentation isn't about the presentation. It's about, as you said so perfectly, it's about the connection. And a lot of that actually is, the purpose was not to give a great sales presentation. The purpose was to win business and make a connection with that, to do that. So tell me about ways that you help people in that regard get to what I love to call the call to action, in ways that they can make the presentation just, it's there, they've delivered something, but there's always that next step.
Yeah, I've got a couple of ideas there, Lou. First of all, it's so true. One of the mistakes I see so often is that so many presenters think that their objective when presenting is just to share some information. And the problem with that is that if we look at how our brain works, all of us, we forget most of what we hear within just a few seconds. So presentations are very bad at informing people. But they are, by the way, I'm not saying that can't be your objective. Maybe all you want to do is just share some information. That's fine. But if that's your only objective, then there is no need to give a presentation. Give them a document, give them a coffee, give them some time so that they can drink the coffee, read your document, and then you share some ideas, you answer the questions. That's okay. But presentations are perfect for transforming people, for creating that connection. I always tell our audience, if after your presentation, your audience doesn't believe, feel, or do something new or different, then you've wasted your time. And even worse, you've wasted theirs. So that's one thing. The other thing is that in practice, how can you do, as you said, that kind of effective call to action? I can give you a very practical tool, and it's an exercise that we use with our clients, which works really well as a call to action as well. And we call it the what, so what next. And we invite our clients to create a 70-word paragraph. And there is a reason why it's 70 words. We can talk about it later. A 70-word paragraph following this format. What, so what next? So the what means, okay, let's think about the audience. What do you want them to take away from your presentation? Which is important, but it's not enough. So what? Let's tell them, why should they care? Why is this relevant and important to them? And then what next? Okay, now that they care, now that they understand why this is important to them, again, what do you want them to do after your presentation? And what we find is that has two benefits. If you create a paragraph that follows that structure, first of all, it allows you to really simplify your message, to get to the core of what it is that you want to communicate. And also, once you have it, you can use it very effectively as a conclusion, as a punchline, your call to action.
So tell me, why the 70 words? I'm curious. 70
words, because a good pace of delivery in public speaking is no more than 140 words per minute. It could be 120, 140. So if you want to have a 30-second call to action, for example, then that's 70 words. Of course, you could have a 1-minute call to action, and that becomes 140 words.
Very cool. I like it. You've broken it down into the elements. Very technical. So we learned what you do, and I love, or what you're about. Now I want to kind of dig into the so what, and I'm going to do this in a unique way. Look, you've been thriving in your business. You've got great clients around the world, and helping them understand how they can increase the way they influence, and which means on most days, Andrea is thriving. But there are certain days that you might be off your game, not 100% on all cylinders. I think I would love to learn, and our listeners really would love to learn, on those days when you're not quite thriving, what practice do you seek, or which individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
Yes. So it is definitely true that on the one hand, I love what I do and I'm very happy, but it's true. It's not that every day that's what happens. Now, I do have something which I love, which, of course, I've got an individual, which is my wife, who is very supportive. But the main individual, really, for me is books. Like, for me, reading is my meditation. I don't meditate, but the very first thing I do every single day, no exception, is just 30 minutes, no more, but I read a book. And that for me is, at least for me, it works. It's a game changer. And it helps in so many ways, not just from a knowledge and business perspective, because I use lots of the things that I learn from books then back into my business. But in general, it's really a kind of meditation practice for me.
I like that. And you're a reader more than a listener, like you're reading the books versus...
I am a reader, and I am a reader of physical books. I've tried Kindle, but I'm still old school from that perspective.
I have somebody very close to me who has been doing the Kindle for quite some time, and then went to another book and then realized, oh my God, I need glasses, because she kept making the font of the Kindle much bigger. So she realized that's the reason she's reading it.
And look, can I also share a super quick story? Because you mentioned rightly that it's not always thriving. There are also difficult days. I will always remember that day. At the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey with the business, I remember I organized an event. It was a face-to-face event here in London, and I hired a room, and the idea was to give a presentation to teach people how to give an effective presentation. And then that was supposed to be an insightful and educational event. But then, of course, at the end, it was supposed to be a call to action to invite anybody who was interested in some sort of a next step. And do you know how many people came to the event?
I'm going to try and give you the benefit of the doubt. Not a lot, maybe 5.
Zero. Like
Zero.
Nobody came. Nobody turned up. And I was there waiting. And that was my very first attempt to thrive, to make it happen. And it didn't work. But then what also happens is, okay, this is something that happens sometimes. And then you could stop there. Whereas then the week after, I did again. And then I did again. And then I did again. And maybe it was one person came. And then 2 people came. And then 5 people. And then 100 people. But I will always remember that day when nobody turned up.
You know, everybody only sees the good moments of people's careers, and they don't understand the road that people had to go to get to that point. And that's what keeps people like yourself thriving, even that progression right there. Let's do the what next part of the program. Can you share with the listeners the admin piece, all the places people can find you, websites, URLs, social spots? We will put it all in the show notes, but it always gets more engagement when they hear it from you.
Yeah. So the main social media channel I use is LinkedIn. And you can find me there with my name. And then there are a couple of things. One is if people are interested in, as a first step, assessing their current presentation skills, we have a tool at Ideas on Stage. It's a quick online quiz that people can take to very quickly assess their presentation skills. They just need to answer a few questions, yes and no. Very simple. It takes less than 5 minutes. It's free. And they will get a score and what their score means to them. And it also identifies opportunities for improvement. And people can find it at ideasonstage.com/score, like when you score a goal. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is that at the moment, I'm hosting a number of free web classes on all things presentation skills. We use Eventbrite. That's the platform we use. Again, if people type my name or the name of a company, Ideas on Stage, they should be able to find it. These are free sessions, less than an hour, on all things public speaking and presentation skills.
Love it. Got one more thing before we go down Fun Street here, and let's talk about the challenges of presenting in 2D versus 3D. Obviously, look, between fun lighting, between cool microphones and good sounds, and obviously a lot of people are presenting in this medium. I wanted to get your any quick tips or suggestions that the listeners should know about when it comes to doing virtual presentations a little more effectively.
Yeah. So in addition to what you just said, the technology that makes a difference online, whereas it doesn't or it shouldn't make a difference when it comes to in-person presentations. Another thing that should be different is the level of interaction that you need to create with the audience. Now, in person, we need to know that the audience's attention physiologically goes down after about 10 minutes. So that means that in a face-to-face presentation, as presenters, we know that at least every 10 minutes, we need to find a way to interact with the audience, which could be as simple as asking a question. Now, online, I would say that the 10-minute rule becomes the 3-minute rule. So you want to interact with the audience more. And you could do that by asking a question, inviting them to type something in the chat. Every time the audience interacts with you, or even better, every time you make the audience do something during a presentation, it means that they are there with you, listening to you, and they're not doing something else. So that's one thing. Another quick tip is, from a delivery perspective, now the same principles apply, but the way you apply certain principles differ. Now, just one example or two. One is eye contact. Now, we want to make good eye contact with the audience. The way we do that in a face-to-face presentation is different from the way we make good eye contact online. Now, online, all we need to do is look at the camera. That's where the audience is. Whereas most people, like, for example, what I will be doing now I'm looking at the screen, now I'm looking at you, but we are not connecting with the audience. So we need to look at the camera. And maybe just one more thing. Before we started, Lou, you told me that you do like Italians, you use your hands a lot, which is a positive thing. Right? I always tell my clients here in the UK, speak Italian with your hands. Especially online, that becomes even more important online because that's the main thing they can see. And when you do that, one quick difference is that you need to keep your hands just a little bit higher than you would normally do in a face-to-face presentation because the audience needs to see them.
Either that or you get a wider camera angle that shows more, that you're not wearing pants. Anyway. Andrea, are you ready to go down Fun Street with me here on Thrive Loud?
Let's try.
Let's try. No, let's go.
We're ready.
We're ready. Okay. Can you share with the listeners an all-time favorite movie or one that you love to rewatch if you ever see it come on television or wherever that connects with you the most?
Yeah, what's the title of their movie? There was also a super famous song by, is it Bob Dylan, the fighter? It's super famous. Do you remember
the boxer?
The boxer. No. The boxer. Yeah.
I think that would be Simon. But there's a movie, The Fighter.
No, not The Fighter, but it was about a boxer who had to go to prison for 20 years or 30 years, and it was in. There's a song.
The Hurricane.
The Hurricane, exactly. Yeah.
There you go. Yes, that what with Denzel. That's a great movie.
Fantastic.
Yes, good story and a great good movie in there. Okay, we're gonna do Fun Street here, Andrea. And the way this works is I'm gonna ask you something, and I want the first thing that comes to your mind. These are things that lift you up, make you feel good, motivate you. In most cases, they make you thrive.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Of late, a song that you've been listening to or one that might pump you up?
People Have the Power. People have the power.
Do you know who sings it?
I don't remember, but yeah, people.
My crack team will try and figure it out. Yeah. People have the power. We'll look into it.
Maybe Patti Smith, I think.
Oh, okay, love Patti Smith. All right. A favorite food. I'm asking somebody who's originally from Italy, so this should be interesting. A favorite food that is not a dessert. A favorite food.
Just a simple dish with simple pasta. I'm Italian. Pasta with fish. Pasta with fish.
That's with fish. Okay.
Yeah.
A favorite dessert.
Favorite dessert is tiramisu.
Okay. He's sticking with the culture.
Yeah.
An activity you wish you did more of.
I wish. Not more of that. I wish I actually did it because I didn't do it. Is playing any kind of musical instrument because I think it's fantastic. I love it, but I've never done it.
Well, then that would be something that you would end up doing more of. Yeah. So that totally fits into the category. An activity you wish you did less of.
Yes, spend less time. Definitely less time on social media in the last few years. I got better and much better recently, but if I think about the past, yes, a lot of wasted time.
If I were to snap my fingers, Andrea, and you can go anywhere in the world, where are you?
Melbourne, Australia.
Have you been?
No.
But that's someplace it's on your list. I guess your bucket list and where you want to go.
Yeah. Because it's the fastest. The further I can go, it's so far from anywhere, and it's fascinating. I just find it fascinating. One place I did go that I loved was a few years ago was Vietnam.
Oh, I've heard that's spectacular. I've heard lots of good things, both and surprisingly beautiful beaches and wonderful foods and all that stuff. That's great stuff. Yeah. Andrea Pacini, truly a pleasure. Ideas on Stage UK. Check him out. We will put all the links in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on the program, sharing your wisdom, all your tips and suggestions. And it was a pleasure to have you on Thrive Loud.
Thank you very much, Lou. It was great. The pleasure was all mine.
And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep thriving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.